The Russia-Ukraine conflict has lasted for 902 days as of now. The counteroffensive by the Ukrainian army in the Kursk direction that began at dawn on August 6 has also been ongoing for 8 days. After a video call with the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Zelensky posted on social media that although the battle is difficult and fierce, the Ukrainian army continues to advance in the Kursk region, and the bargaining chips of the Ukrainian side are increasing. Ukraine has taken control of 74 settlements in the Kursk region and is conducting inspections and stability measures in these places as time goes by. The fog of war in the Kursk direction is gradually clearing. The Ukrainian army has deployed an increasing number of equipment. In terms of main battle tanks, there are the T-72, more than 100 tanks upgraded by the Czech Republic, which the Ukrainian army regards as a treasure. The T-60 for BV Mod 2022 refurbished by the Czech Republic. The T-80 BV, a small amount of remaining equipment of the Ukrainian army. And the PT-91 3 battalions provided by Poland. Secondly, the infantry fighting vehicles and armored vehicles include the Ukrainian Army's own BMP-12, the BWP-1 provided by Poland, the M1126 Striker given by the United States, the Wolverine provided by Poland, as well as various counter-ambush vehicles, armored Humvees, etc. The Ukrainian army even pulled the old equipment like the BTR-60 to the front line. The self-propelled artillery used includes the Polish KRAB self-propelled artillery and the M777 A2 field howitzer. It is worth noting that the Ukrainian army has even deployed the 2S7 self-propelled howitzer, which is regarded as a treasure by them, to the front line. What's even more outrageous is that the Ukrainian army actually has accompanying air defense. The Russian army has used Lancet loitering munitions to destroy at least the Tunguska M field air defense systems of the Ukrainian army in the Kursk region, and has also suppressed the operation of the Ukrainian army's Patriot system, especially the Tunguska M, which is as precious as a treasure in the Ukrainian army and has not appeared in the past 2 years. The equipment used by the Ukrainian army this time can be described as the ace in the hole, and the numbers of the troops used are also confusing. In recent days, open-source intelligence information has summarized the numbers of the Ukrainian army in various directions on the 2 offensive axes of the Ukrainian army. The R200 highway is responsible for the in-depth attack by the 3 relatively complete brigade-level combat groups of the 22nd Mechanized Brigade, the 88th Mechanized Brigade, and the 61st Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Army. At the same time, 4 company-level tactical groups of the Russian Free Army have been strengthened in the direction of Kolinvi. Multiple company-level tactical groups of the 82nd Air Assault Brigade, the 103rd Territorial Defense Brigade, and the 80th Air Assault Brigade of the Ukrainian Army are responsible for the in-depth attack. At present, it has been observed that the 82nd Air Assault Brigade has at least 1.5 battalion-level tactical groups, and the 80th Air Assault Brigade has at least 1 strengthened battalion-level tactical group. In addition, there are various units in the Ukrainian army, such as the GUR Special Forces with a large number of personnel and mercenaries of the International Legion. For example, among the Ukrainian troops killed by the Russian army a few days ago, soldiers of the Unmanned Aircraft Reconnaissance Battalion of the 92nd Assault Brigade were also found. Moreover, the Ukrainian army has also deployed the HIMARS rocket launchers to assist, indicating that the reserve campaign artillery of the Ukrainian army headquarters has also participated in the war. Therefore, analyzing from the equipment used by the Ukrainian army and the numbers of the troops dispatched, the troops dispatched by the Ukrainian army not only include 3 relatively complete, fully equipped and fully staffed brigades, but also a large number of still combat-effective company-level units have been withdrawn from other battlefronts to form tactical groups. such as the 80th Air Assault Brigade, the 92nd Assault Brigade, and the 82nd Air Assault Brigade. Some units have withdrawn one company, and some units have withdrawn one battalion. These are the remaining relatively strong combat forces in these brigades. At the same time, a military artillery brigade has been equipped for this assault group. The reserve artillery missile forces of the headquarters have been withdrawn, and even an air defense brigade and a pontoon engineer brigade have been equipped. So my final conclusion is that, in terms of the units the Ukrainian army has invested in the Kursk direction, not counting the troops that may continue to be invested at present, on the 8th day of the battle, the Ukrainian army has invested troops equivalent to 4 mechanized brigades. In addition, an artillery brigade, a rocket battalion, an anti-aircraft rocket battalion and an engineering and chemical group have been assigned, and the total number of troops has exceeded 10,000. The equipment used, such as PT-91, T-72E, BTR-4E, Wolverine, etc., either were explicitly declared by NATO to be provided to Ukraine, but were hidden by Ukraine and had few records of being destroyed, or were painstakingly accumulated by the Ukrainian army. Therefore, in my opinion, the Ukrainian army's offensive in Kursk this time, the size of the troops has reached the level of a beggar version of a combined arms army group. There are hundreds of various types of ground combat equipment, and a considerable part belongs to the strategic reserve of the Ukrainian army. Its nature is undoubtedly the Ukrainian army's summer offensive this year. The campaign offensive of the Ukrainian army in the Kursk direction is equivalent to a summer offensive with the strength of a beggar version of a combined arms army group. So how did the Russian army perform? I think the Russian army's campaign policy is fine, but it is too chaotic in terms of troop organization. It is said that the Russian army's campaign policy is fine because the Russian army has fully understood the style of General Syrsky I of the Ukrainian army. General Syrsky's style of using troops belongs to the Soviet deep battle style. The troops adopt multi-echelon attacks, and the leading ones are reconnaissance and destruction teams composed of rapid mobile clusters. These are some mobile and flexible company and platoon-level units, undertaking tasks such as rapid breakthroughs, raids and disruptions behind enemy lines. The first and second echelons following these units attack in sequence. The first echelon rushes deeply regardless of everything, and the second echelon is responsible for seizing key points in this way. There is a DRG in the front as the guide. The first echelon of mechanized troops conducts in-depth attacks in the middle, and the second echelon of infantry troops seizes key points in the rear. If the Russian army fails to achieve echelon defense, or if the on-site commander panics and collapses in will after discovering the enemy in the depth, the Ukrainian army can achieve continuous breakthroughs and defeat the Russian army's defense deployment, but judging from the defense situation of the Russian army in these 8 days, these 3 tricks of General Syrsky I have not worked. I think the problem lies in the place of Suja. The place of Suja is similar to Balaklia during the Kharkiv counteroffensive in September 2022. For the Ukrainian army, it must pass quickly at the first time, and the subsequent echelons should seize it immediately. However, unexpectedly, the local people's self-defense teams and National Guard units not only did not panic, but calmly engaged in battle with the Ukrainian army and successfully blocked the first echelon of the Ukrainian army in place. When the first echelon of the Ukrainian army finally broke through Suja and conducted in-depth attacks in the direction of Martinovo, it encountered the reinforcement forces of the 13th Commando of Wagner and Akhmat of Chechnya. Although the Russian army paid a certain price for the hasty defense, the Ukrainian army has lost the suddenness of the attack once the Ukrainian army is forced to stop and engage in frontal battles. It loses the suddenness of the campaign and also loses the opportunity for combat. For a force like the Ukrainian army, which lacks strategic reserves, has poor continuous offensive capabilities, and completely relies on one-time operations. This is basically a disaster. The Ukrainian army failed to pass through Suja quickly at the first time, and after passing, it engaged in frontal confrontations with the Russian army in Martinovo-Vika, thus ruining the entire battle situation. Of course, there are some contingencies in the Russian army's defense organization in Suja. The actions of the Wagner commando in Martinovo-Vika, and the successful blocking of the Ukrainian army by Akhmat and the Aerospace Army Motorized Infantry Regiment in Kolinvi. But these accidental factors precisely reflect the correct campaign policy of the Russian army. When the frontline defense forces detect the presence of Ukrainian army units in their depth, they should not retreat in panic, but should hold their current positions and prevent the continuous breakthrough of the subsequent echelons of the Ukrainian army. At the same time, the aerospace forces and the campaign artillery of the Russian army should do their best to disrupt the rents of the Ukrainian army's attack echelons and carry out interdiction strikes against the Ukrainian army. The combat units that rush to reinforce the defense urgently should not wait for the neighboring units to be in place, but should immediately rely on the transportation lines and quickly switch to hasty defense, even at a certain cost. They must cut off the momentum of the Ukrainian army's deep thrust at the same time. More troops have begun to search and eliminate the DRGs that are active everywhere in the depth area, resolutely carry out information control, and prevent the DRGs from ambushing scattered Russian army units in the depth, conducting sabotage and disruption, and conducting cognitive operations in the cyberspace through methods such as taking photos and checking in, etc. Such classic cyber-cognitive warfare as PS road signs. Looking at the current campaign policy of the Russian army, search and kill the Ukrainian army's DRG at the front end. Rely on transportation lines and key points to block the first echelon of the Ukrainian army in the middle, and rely on artillery and aviation in the rear to interdict the second echelon of the Ukrainian army. This is aimed at the weaknesses of the Ukrainian army's DRG's lack of continuous combat capability, reliance on the first echelon for supplies, the first echelon of the Ukrainian army's reliance on the second echelon to seize key points, and all echelons must cooperate organically to exert the maximum combat effectiveness. It has successfully cut off the coherence of the multi-echelon attack of the Ukrainian army. After dividing the Ukrainian army's attack echelons, the Ukrainian army's campaign attack is naturally difficult to sustain. Therefore, I think that as of now, the Russian army's campaign defense policy has no problem. However, this does not mean that there are no problems with the Russian army's combat organization. The biggest problem for the Russian army at present is that the organization of the troops is too chaotic. As we mentioned earlier, a large number of Russian troops hastily launched defenses before the neighboring units were in place, resulting in all Russian units fighting on their own locally. So far, there has been no real integration. Either they rely on transportation lines to block the advancing Ukrainian troops, or they search for DRGs in the rear like killing cockroaches. It can be said that it is mobile defense, or it can be said that its defense organization is in chaos and everyone is fighting chaotic ally. And that's right. At present, in the Kolinvi direction, there are still about 2 battalions of the Aerospace Army Motorized Infantry Regiment fighting. In Semenovka in the north, there are probably several companies of the 11th Air Assault Brigade searching for the DRG of the Ukrainian Army. In Suja, the main combat direction, there are currently the 488th Regiment of the 144th Motorized Infantry Division of the 20th Army Group, the 273rd Regiment of the 47th Tank Division of the 1st Guards Tank Army, a battalion of the 810th Naval Infantry Division, as well as Wagner Akhmat of Chechnya, the National Guard, local self-defense forces, and even a company of the 4th Guards Tank Division. It is a miracle that the Ukrainian army can be blocked in place by relying on these scattered units. But it is obviously impossible to push the Ukrainian army back only by relying on these fragmented units. Therefore, I think the biggest problem for the Russian army at present is that the troops are in great chaos due to the hasty launch of defense. So for the development of the war situation next, my point of view is that for the Ukrainian army, it depends on whether the Ukrainian army is still willing to increase its investment. In fact, up to now, it is quite unfavorable for the Ukrainian army. Just like the German army was blocked in Bastogne for a long time during World War II and could not even cross the Meuse River. With the existing troops, it is impossible to achieve the planned combat goals. But if it continues to increase its investment, the war situation in the Red Army city deteriorated seriously yesterday. The Russian army has already attacked the city of Gorodivka. If troops are further withdrawn, the Red Army city will only lose faster. The biggest problem of the Ukrainian army lies in the increasingly serious tendency of political warfare. It is said that Zelensky has issued an order to hold the current position. So, perhaps the Ukrainian army, on an impulse, will really continue to increase its investment in the Kursk theater, even mobilizing the troops from Donbas to fill the gap. Coupled with the fact that the Ukrainian army has been fiercely attacking Suja in the past 2 days, I think we must be prepared for the Ukrainian army to fight for more than another month at present. The so-called major counteroffensive of the Ukrainian army has actually only opened up a rather small area. Therefore, for the Russian army at present, the primary problem is obvious. It must integrate the local troops as soon as possible and build a continuous front line. Up to now, it has been the 8th day, and the Russian army has not yet formed a relatively coherent defense line. This is really unacceptable. The units currently engaged in battle as battalion and company tactical groups must be organized into advanced tactical corps, set up defense support points, and show an attitude of regular defense operations. Only by forming a continuous defense line can the Russian army avoid winning first and then losing when the Ukrainian army increases its investment later. And only then can it have the strength to launch a large-scale counterattack and drive the Ukrainian army back to the attack departure point completely after the kinetic energy of the Ukrainian army's attack is exhausted.